Welcome to Influential Visions. Here we interview futuristic leaders who share their deep industry knowledge and business experience with you, ensuring you have your finger on the pulse and your eyes wide open. Here is your host, Nathaniel Schooler.
So I am very privileged today to be joined by Stephen J. Manning, and we are going to talk about the AI-driven world that we are living in. We're going to talk about disruption. We're going to give a bit of history about AI and things like this, and we're going to talk about Stephen's career when he built a $1 billion marketing business out in the States, and he actually was using data and using AI before AI was actually even really a mainstream thing like it is today. So I want to say thank you, Stephen. I always appreciate your time and I appreciate speaking with you. And I always find you deliver massive value. So I want to thank you very much.
Well, thank you for the kind words. If this is not just audio, I may have to blush, but thank you.
Classic. So I mean, you know, at the moment that we're digging into some research, right? There are all these different big tech companies. They're all fighting for AI. They are all kind of buying companies. They are recruiting developers. They are threatening to take over the world. But at the end of the day, we know that AI is becoming ubiquitous to business. And I mean, back in the day, you had a lot of different data, and we talked a little bit about that before we started recording. And you mentioned to me that you noticed some sort of anomalies within that data, like for example, you had twice as many records 1 month as you did the month before, and this just outlined to me the importance of the data and also the people who are programming these AI models. Is that a fair thing to say, Stephen?
Absolutely. The good thing about data, and I know that's not particularly good English, is what it can bring to your process or your processes. The more theoretically, the more the better. That said, it's really relevant where that road in the desert leads if you happen to be going in the opposite direction. So it's very important to understand the data, understand the genesis of the data, the depth of the data, whether the data is specific, direct, incurred, what the nature of the thing is. That's something that we got into too many decades ago, understanding what it is. Now, the data is useful by definition in so many ways, every way, and it can also be dangerous. As it is with every big concept, big idea, it can revolutionize the world, it can harm the world. It can create a whole lot of happiness for people, and it can destroy people. In fact, it can destroy generations. You and I have seen that, although me more so than you, because I'm quite a bit older than you are. At the very beginning of the incredible revolution that the internet was, which I consider one of the wonders of the world. I think it's more amazing than the Great Wall of China or the Babylon or whatever. Most of us, I mean overwhelmingly most of us, felt we were just roadkill on the information superhighway. There's a group of people, a handful of people that were running around talking about the internet, the World Wide Web, it's incredible applications, all of that. I tell you that I felt somewhat the same, although I think we were the 10th people on the backbone of the internet when this insanity first started. I think we were among the very, very first practitioners of commerce on the internet. Yet, I compare to we call them kids, for lack of any other good way, the kids that were doing this stuff were light years ahead of us. One of the questions that I ponder, you and I ponder, is AI, which is ubiquitous, which is everything, it's everywhere, by far the shiniest new penny in the history of the world. Again, I wonder, some people think that it will revolutionize the world while destroying it. So I think about it, is this a miracle? Or is this a return of plague of locusts? What is it? The problem for me, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool marketer, advertiser, talking head, whatever else it may be, I'm astounded by it in terms of more the velocity of its growth and acceptance than anything else. Because fundamentally, and I have to digress, being the king of digressions, all of you listening, half hour ago, Nathaniel was lecturing me on the synergy between IBM, Watson, and he cited 7 different artificial data manipulation models that are being integrated at the same time. He lost me after he said, hi, let me explain this to you. But I will read, I will digest. Again, I would like to offer you my definition of AI. May I?
Please.
And this, the genesis of this is literally in the 80s when we were in the AI world. I just was not smart enough to give it a real good name, artificial intelligence, with a wonderful acronym. I call it synthetic data. So how about a show of hands? Because again, all starts with data. And the new thing called big data. I could do 2 hours on big data, but let's not do that now. So I asked the question. Take big data, we all get that, right? Add to data mining. We know what that is, right? We read about it all day long. Then we do something called predictive modeling, right? What does data suggest? Where is this going to go? We all know that, don't we? What do we do? Heck, you can do predictive modeling on your mobile phone. And then you create some narratives, meaning, well, according to my predictive model, I can make Mary Ellen buy those red shoes, the size 7.5, from that boutique on Ventura Boulevard tomorrow afternoon, which I know she's going to drive by. Okay, go back. Big data, add data mining to it. That's some predictive modeling. Then the narratives and the psychographics of all of that. And what do you get? You get artificial intelligence. You get AI. Now, how is that for pedestrian definition of AI?
I think it's very useful for a lot of people that listen to this channel. They want to learn how to explain these concepts in easier ways. A lot of people they listen to the podcast and they are technology people, and a lot of people who are within technology really struggle with being able to explain these things very, very simply. And what I find interesting, which I grabbed from the IBM Watson X actually website, web page, 75% of CEOs believe competitive advantage will depend on who has the most advanced generative AI. So I thought that was particularly interesting. I also thought that 50% are now integrating generative AI into products and services. It's only 50%. I would have expected that to be more, if I'm honest. And 43% are using generative AI to inform their strategic decisions. I would have expected that to at least be 80%. So if you think about over half of big businesses are really in danger of being disrupted to the point of no return, in my personal opinion. I think that, yes, things have changed, but they haven't changed that much in the last 50 years, right? There is data, there is just more data, and it's faster to obtain that data, and it's faster to analyze that data. And you said this to me earlier, and I was like, but I've been saying that for 10 years. And so I thought I'd say that before you, to be honest, because it's like, it's interesting how we share that opinion, because for all of the techie people, they're like, oh, well, it's all new and it's all this big shiny object. It's like the moment you get behind a big shiny object without sitting back and saying, well, this is what's been happening for 5 or 10 years. And it's like, really, if you think like that, you're going to be in a bad place as far as my brain is concerned. What do you think, Steve, about the 50% or more of businesses that are perhaps risking disruption here?
Well, again, I think that AI is disruptive both ways, really well, productive, and all of that, and that can be disruptive to the very core of business philosophy or processes within a company. Um, it's interesting. The company, an enterprise, the reason for existence is to satisfy the needs of its stakeholders. There's a great little word, stakeholder. That means the owners, the stockholders. I have had the privilege of being around, corporate entities, as have you. I've sat on the boards. I run, businesses. To actually be able to distill that down to something very simple. One, my stockholders, if I may make it personal, are interested in two things. One, stockholder value, dividend, and two, my ability to sustain that and improve it at somewhere around the rate of performance of the S&P. Quite frankly, my stockholders, if I can demonstrate that, best way to demonstrate it is robust, predictable performance over time. My stockholders don't really want to know if I drive a 12-cylinder turbocharged Ferrari or a really good, solid General Motors truck that just keeps on trucking at 2.5% a year. That's my experience. Now, that is not to be confused with what so many do when we go pitch. When we go to Silicon Valley and pitch for money, I haven't done that for myself ever. 100% of everything I've ever done was self-funded, which is testimony to my being stupid. Use other people's money. No, I was not smart enough to do that. But I've had the opportunity many times to pitch on behalf of other new enterprises. I can't sell oxygen to a drowning diver without proving how superior technologically we are, how advanced we are, the extent to which we are able to have or will incorporate AI into our processes. Our ability to find those data points that no one else has, really, that is part of the pitch. In fact, it's part of the ever-present, critical 1.5-page investment summary, the executive summary, in the 35-page book. That's where we are today. If I may quote myself, I've said this once or twice, we must demonstrate that. Not whether we do it or not, that's another story. And I direct you to that thing you and I did. It's part of leadership, success, all that we do. And I hope people listen in, as with due humility, we deliver a ton of value. Nothing is better than when I took the CEO, this elegant man in the elegant suit, took him for a 3-day walk from Manhattan, and we stopped in every retail store that was relevant to try to sell them one-on-one before we got into really slick technology and built a massive marketing platform. How else can I demonstrate better how I sell you than try to sell you? How about one-on-one? That poor man went through a nice pair of shoes, a lot of shirts, and damned me right until he raised $57 million and sold the thing a month later.
What I do find is that really people don't actually understand how CEOs really think. And what I thought was particularly interesting in these figures from IBM is that they said that out of 3 out of 4 CEOs, this is almost 3 out of 4 CEOs, believe their teams have the generative AI capabilities that they need, right? But only 3 in 10 of their C-suite teams agree. So I don't know whether that is some sort of positive mental attitude, whether it's a glass half full versus half empty. I haven't quite decided on that one. But I do think that people underestimate the capabilities of the businesses that actually have these capabilities, because we speak to people all the time, don't we, that within these big corporations, these tech companies, and the technologies that they have are absolutely, and chat gpt is just like a child's toy compared to what we're talking about with these companies. And I find it very, very worrying, actually, that 3 in 10 of their C-suite teams agree um, that they have the capabilities. Like I don't quite understand it, really, to be honest.
Well, if you allow me a little bit of cynicism, uh, hey, it wouldn't be one of our gigs if we weren't at least a little bit cynical. Uh, Isolate those two groups. Senior management. Let us be clear, and certainly my experience, most of these enterprises of any size, particularly those that are successful, whatever the definition is, those CEOs, to some extent, pay lip service to having to get more into the whole world of AI. However, just dig a little bit, and they have been in the nascent AI world for years. They are practicing that stuff every day. It goes under different names. The nomenclature is a little bit different. The bottom line is you develop the data, you develop the intelligence around the data, you develop the psychographics of your consumer and all of that, and then you apply it and tell that marketing team, this is our audience, this is what they think, this is what they want, that's what we're going to sell. We're not going to sell Medicare supplement insurance policies to 35-year-old athletes. But that's kind of a tiny little silly example. But what I just described ultimately is what AI is. Whatever the topic is, crunch the data, understand some of the psychology of the data, which is a very interesting, maybe contradictory set of terms. Psychology of data. By the way, that's the world I have been in for 40 years. And then they crunch the to-do list. The to-do list could just be 200 clever words. It could be definitional. It could be widgets, moving widgets, assemble this to that, create. Hey, listen, a couple years ago, digital printing of product. Say what? What the heck do you think that was? There's artificial intelligence forced into an equipment manufacturing piece of gear. We manufacture heart valves without a human ever going near it. That's artificial intelligence at work. So all this exists now. The subset of people who say this is just not insufficient, it's exactly the same, in my humble opinion, as this cottage industry that's into blockchain. You know what? They created an industry for themselves. Congratulations, you found a way to make a living. Now, of course, there's a whole lot of blockchain experts that spend their days at the Starbucks drinking coffee all morning, hoping for somebody else to show up who needs you, rather than anybody in the building you're in. There are experts in the building you're in on blockchain. No need to study it, just go buy their stuff. Buy their service, then you go sell your widgets. The two subsets, there's a subset that will always be dissatisfied, that will always look for the next thing and next thing and next. By the way, if they are disruptive to the core of the business, present and short-term future, bad thing. If they accrue to good stuff for the long term, good thing. I know of significant companies, enterprises in the energy sector specifically. I'm familiar with some of those groups of really smart women and men who sit around all day long thinking about what exactly are we going to be 30 years from now. That's what they do. Is that useful? Damn right it is. I did a speaking gig a little while ago to a very large, interested audience. Topic was marketing 20 years from now. I giggled because I said, gee, I'm not sure I know what I'm going to do next week. But let me think about it. I called every smart people I knew, asked them to give me more smart people, and I talked to 30, 40 people. Hey, what is marketing going to look like in 20 years? I certainly got laughed at, and I got some of the most astoundingly sci-fi stuff thrown at me, which, by the way, happened just a couple of years later. But you know what? Uh, it is critical to the ultimate goals of a business. So there's a subset of people that's all they do. You know what? You and me are yesterday's lunch. The new good thing is around the world. By the way, this may sound contrary to what I just said. One of the things I preach, and you'll forgive me for this, but one of the things I preach is that from my standpoint, my perspective, you see, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I'm not the dumbest guy in the room either. But I'm smart enough to understand the limits of my knowledge and my ability to learn over time or short time. So I say, Nat, it's highly unlikely that I'm going to invent a cure for some rare disease or for cancer or this is how we feed half the world. Not likely to do that as much as I strive for independent thought. That means that when I'm done thinking, which hope never happens, then I come up with, hey, I know the answer to that, or here's a great idea. This is the way to do it. I recognize I'm highly unlikely to have invented a cure for that orphan disease or how to refine a mineral. So my conclusions are nothing more than testable hypotheses. Therefore, whatever I conclude, I now need to ask the next question and the next and the next and the next, which is how I raise my kids. Always ask the next question, next and next. The subset of people that you mentioned a moment ago, who on the surface appear to be, and they are, sometimes detrimental to the immediacy of the company and the immediate function of the company, are absolutely needed. Those people don't ever have a definitive answer to anything, but they have some really darn good questions. So as I had a client who was an absolute undisputed market leader, a manufacturing thing. One guy owned it. He sat in the corner of office in a big wicker chair, in robes, with Ravi Shankar playing in the background, contemplating the world. Well, the entire staff had MBAs from Wharton and Harvard, and they're big business. And he was absolutely bored out of his mind because those people kept pushing for more. He was saving whales. He was rallying against gas-powered leaf blowers. Don't tell me about building another 2 factories. What we ended up with is parsing out a little piece of that company, populating it with some really smart people, with this guy in the lead contemplating, where are we going to be 10 years from now? Meanwhile, the big old company kept humming, making profits, doing really well, building more factories, doing what they were doing. But this guy sat on top of a small, we literally carved out a department who lived in the future. Well, you know what came of that? Well, we had a leader who just was something revitalized, which was my job. Well, what came out of that is there was, in fact, emerging a future for the enterprise. So it's those people who push people above them. I'm not happy. More AI, more this, more that. Oh, you just get out of my office. I have a UPS strike to think about today. Those people are necessary in the grand scheme of things. And the little example I gave you was very illuminating for me. My job was to somehow figure out how to make him happy or push him out of the way. Well, we made him happy and we made him really relevant to the future of that beautiful, well-oiled machine. And he kind of abandoned years because he got bored. And the whales, well, he kind of saved those. And yeah, the weeds were just high in the parking lot because we can have those nasty lawnmowers. They pollute the air. We got to save the whales, and he got to work on the lawnmowers and to a significant extent ensure the continuity of that business way beyond his years. I think that's a long answer to your short question.
That's fantastically interesting. It's actually amazing how much you can achieve in 10 years because what I heard from Michael Tobin when I interviewed him a few weeks ago, we discussed a similar topic actually, but he's into tech as well, but he's more sort of into like data and cloud and storage and big tech stuff, right? And he basically said that we overestimate what we can do in 1 to 2 years, and we underestimate what we can do in 10 years. And I thought that was quite interesting that you sort of mentioned the 10-year focus. And I think that's great. I think to have that plan is super important, and really think also about people's jobs. And at the end of the day, yes, we could go and we could implement a new customer service department and get rid of lots and lots of people, right? But we need to think, well, what future do we want to be creating? What responsibilities do we have to society, to the world, to people? And that's something that not that many people are talking about at the moment. They're really just saying, well, maybe people just need new jobs. It's like, yeah, but surely corporations, they have a responsibility to the people within them and actually to the wider society, really, in my opinion. But Stephen, I want to thank you so much for spending your time speaking with me and sharing this with the audience. Was there a finishing note that you would like to add before we scoot off?
I I think that Michael Tobin is a guy worth listening to.
Thank
A
you.
really smart man. Um, he has some clarity of thinking that's a little bit on the unusual side. So that's a good thing. Oh, this is great chat. Thank you very much. I think that one of the things you just said about companies having developed a sense of themselves beyond we make really good widgets or we sell good technology. I think it is very important for a business to develop a social conscience. I understand that going back into my little past. I remember clearly the morning I woke up with a social conscience having to do with our employees. I think it's very important that a company has social conscience in generally speaking, and then specifically to their biggest asset, which is their people, not to be confused with a political conscience. Again, my stockholders don't care where my politics are. I mean that not just me. Any stockholder that I know doesn't really care, and privately they don't really care what that company is associated with, as long as the profits are there. That's just the reality. But a social conscience, that's a different thing altogether. I think a company doesn't develop a social conscience does not have a soul. Now, I don't want to be lectured on a company doesn't have a soul by definition. It's inert. It's a thing. It's a thing with a massive checkbook. And it's a thing with a massive ability to impact lives of people just by virtue of what they produce and then how they position that in the marketplace. So that's a big topic. One day, perhaps you and I will spend some time on social conscience versus political advocacy and all that. Big topics. But again, going back to what Tobin said, everything goes about us with such speed. The technology gallops ahead of our ability to digest it. Often the technology was way ahead of the social constructs so we can absorb it. More often than not, is ahead of a body of law that must ultimately regulate it all. Problem with that, of course, is remember, be careful. When you open that little door and the birdie flies out, it's kind of hard to put it back. It's like hard to unring the bell. So the bodies of laws intended to regulate these massive advances are typically inferior in quality and superior in just pow. It's just descend on you like a locust. To
Yeah.
try to do what? Put that back in the box. You can't put it back in the box. You can make sure that it's not entirely disruptive. But getting in front of advances like that, might as well walk in front of a running locomotive.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. And I think you and Michael Tobin have both been CEOs of major corporations, so you have a lot in common actually. And I find both of you very interesting, and you in particular spend a lot more time with me than he does. because he's involved with all sorts of different things that aren't really related to podcasting and content. But to anyone that's listening to this, Stephen and I are writing a lot of content together. We do a lot of audios together, and you also should check out Stephen's book. I'm going to drop a link to his latest book, and I will also drop a link to his website as well, so you can go and check out some of the stuff that he writes about, which is related to tech and business, basically, and life. So thank you once again, and thanks so much for listening, everyone.
Thank you, Nat, very much.
Thanks very much for listening to Influential Visions. Please make sure you share this episode with your friends and business connections. And don't forget to drop us a review wherever you listen. Thanks.